Hello everyone and welcome to a new Unity scripting tutorial. And in this video we're going to be covering PlayerPrefs. So we're going to be going over how to save them, load them, and delete them. And I'll also kind of explain when I use them and when I don't use them. So the first thing that we're going to do is to create a few UI elements so that we can see the PlayerPrefs and we can input values to them. So let's make something like an input field. So UI input field, and we'll call this one player name. And then we will also make a UI text, and we will call this one score. And the names are pretty self-explanatory, so we're going to be adding the player's name into this field, and we will be showing a score into this one. The main reason why we're adding two different ones is because we want the text field to be a string, and then the score is going to be an int. So let's make this a bit bigger so we can see it and make it white. Okay, so now that we have the UI element set up, let's also make a button so that when we can click on it, we save the PlayerPrefs. So we're going to create a UI element button, and we will call this one save. And let's also make this one a bit bigger and then pull it down here. Okay, so let's call this one score. All right, and then for the button in the text, let's have it say save. All right, now that we have everything set up, let's create a script that's going to be saving and loading these PlayerPrefs. So let's create a new C# script. We'll call this one PlayerPrefs tutorial. And let's also create an empty game object that's going to hold these PlayerPrefs, or this script. So create an empty object and attach our script to it. And then let's open up our script. Let me make it a bit bigger. There we go. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is to create a public input field and a public text so that we can get access to these elements, the UI elements that we created. So let's make public input field. We're going to have to add UI Unity engine.ui, and we'll call this one player input field, and a public text, we'll call this one score text. We will also be saving an int score in this class. So let's make an int score. So this is going to be our integer value, and this is just the text that we're going to be showing on the screen. Now let's set our score to, let's say, 20 by default, so equals 20. And then we're going to now cover the first function that we can use for PlayerPrefs, which is hasKey. So we can say if PlayerPrefs dot hasKey, and this takes in a key. So for PlayerPrefs, every PlayerPref that you set, you need to give it a unique key. This unique key is a string. So for example, for the player name, we can give it something like player name. So if the player name key already exists, we can get the value of that key. So we can say player input field dot text is going to be equal to PlayerPrefs dot get string, and then pass it in the key that we want to get, which is the player name. So we can say player name. And there we go. So this function is going to be returning the value of that key in the PlayerPrefs, and then assigning it into our player input field dot text. Now we can do the same thing for the score. So we can say if PlayerPrefs dot hasKey, and this one will be score, for example. We can say mscore equals, so now we're assigning it into our integer value, PlayerPrefs dot get int, and then the key is score. And then down here we're going to say score text dot text is going to be equal to our score dot toString. So when we're loading the player pref, we're putting it into the score integer, and then we're converting the score integer into an int and assigning it into the score text. And yeah, this is basically how you check if a player pref is already set, and then this is how you get that player pref. Keep in mind that these have to be unique. So if you assign a different value somewhere else to a player pref called player name, that's going to override the one that we already have. So now that we have all of this set up, we can assign these values in Unity and see what happens. So let's go back to Unity, click on our script. Now we have the player input field and the score field. So let's assign the player name into the input field and the score into the text field. And then let's run this and see what happens. There we go. So at first we didn't have any text inside our player name player pref, so we didn't assign anything. We didn't have a score either, so we used the default value, which is 20, and then we set it to the score string, and that's why we ended up with 20 here and an empty input field right here. So how do we go at saving these player prefs? And to save it, let's make a function down here, and we'll call this one so public void save prefs. And what this function will do, will say player prefs dot set string, and set string will take a key value, which is going to be the key value that we were using, so player name, and then a value for this player name, and the value will be mPlayer input text or input field dot text. So the input field dot text, so whatever we write in here, when we want to save, we're going to save the text that we inputted. And then we will do the exact same thing for the score. So we can say player prefs dot set int, the int key is score, and the value will be our m score. There we go. So now when this function is called, it's going to be saving our player pref. So set string to set a player pref that has a string value, and set int to save a player pref that has an int value. And now all we need to do is to call this function when we press the save button. So on the button over here, we can go down and add an onClick event, attach our game object to it, and in the function we can do save prefs. So over here now, when we click this, we should be saving out whatever we have, whatever the values are for the score and the player input field. So let's try to run this. And we still have nothing in here, so we can write in character, for example, and then we can save. And then if we stop now the game and then rerun it, you'll notice that this updated into character because it's loading our player pref. It also saved the score to be 20. So let's try to change the score. For example, let's say in the update we can say if input.getKeyDown and the key code dot up arrow. So if we press the up arrow, let's increment the score. So we can say mScore plus plus, and then mScore text dot text is going to be equal to mScore dot toString. So we're incrementing our score and then setting it to be the score text. So now if we run the game and press the up arrow, as you can see, it's incrementing the score. We have character here, so let's change that to char, for example, with the 29 for the score. And then if we hit save, stop the game, rerun it again. And as you can see, it's char and 28. And it's pretty much as simple as that. You can save and load things pretty easily using the player prefs, but I wouldn't recommend it for everything because all you have to work with is player prefs. So for example, if over here, if I write player prefs dot get, and as you can see, you can only save an int, a string, and a float. It's not very flexible. So for example, if you want to save an array, you have to give a key for every array element, and it gets pretty messy. So usually when I have an array, for example, or let's say player position and stuff like that, I don't like using player prefs for it. I'd rather create a class and serialize it and save it as a file. That's much better to do. However, if you want to, let's say, save things between scenes, For example, let's say you want to open a new scene, and at the same time you want to destroy all the objects in the old scene. So no object is going to be coming over, so you can't just move data over from the old scene. What you can do is save that data into PlayerPrefs and then load it up into the next scene. Or you could save pretty small things, like for example a score for the player, where you can save it in the PlayerPrefs and load it when the game is closed and then reopen. But for complicated objects, I would not recommend using the PlayerPrefs for. Now, for the final thing that we can do is to delete these PlayerPrefs. So we can do stuff like if input.getKey down, and let's say keycode.space. If we press space, we want to delete all of the PlayerPrefs that we set so far. So we can say PlayerPrefs.delete all, and that will remove all the PlayerPrefs that we set. This will only remove the PlayerPrefs that we set for this application, not every application that you set PlayerPrefs for. So this will only do it for the current application that's running. And now, if we run it, you'll notice that we still have our PlayerPrefs here loaded. If we press space and then close the game and rerun it again, the text is gone and we're back to 20 for the score. So the PlayerPrefs were deleted and nothing has been set again. So this is used to delete everything at once, but you can also do PlayerPrefs.delete key to delete specific keys. So you can also do that, but I'm pretty sure this is pretty clear. You can just give it a key name, like for example player name or score, and it would delete that key and you wouldn't have it. So this is a pretty quick rundown on how PlayerPrefs work. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, this is it for the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.